Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are doing my October wrap-up. We're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of October. October was a weird month, so I was expecting to read a bunch of things that I was really going to love, and I didn't love all of them. And some of them I didn't love to the point that they actually put me into some small reading slumps. So not great. And then I added some books in and there were some novellas and short stories. Like, it was just weird. It was a weird reading month for me. However, I'm still counting it as a win because the books that I did read pushed my goals forward in a meaningful kind of way. And honestly, all reading is good reading. So I'm going to count it as a win. But the very first thing that I read is Touch of Power by Maria V. Snyder, and then later in the month I read Scent of Magic. And these are books 1 and 2 in the Healer trilogy. And this trilogy is a fantasy trilogy that is following our main character of Avery, and she is a healer. She's the last healer of like the 9 kingdoms. I think it's 9. And because there was a plague that kind of tore through these kingdoms, and the healers that didn't die from the plague ended up dying at the hands of the general population who thought that the healers should have done more. At the beginning of the very first book, Avery is discovered as a healer, and she is now in jail awaiting her execution when she is kidnapped and forced to go on this journey where at the end her kidnappers are hoping she will heal somebody pretty important. And it just kind of goes from there. So this first book I thought was very fast, easy read. I thought it was occasionally predictable, but just generally enjoyable. I did have some problems, which we'll get into, but they weren't like overwhelming. And then I read Scent of Magic, and it was not an easy, fast read. It was slow. We just spent a little bit too much time on each plot point so it just dragged. And unfortunately, it was a dual perspective, and both perspectives had this problem, so both perspectives dragged. And I just did not love it. And then, of course, the last 20 pages were so fast that it was absolute whiplash. There were more things that happened in the last 20 pages than happened in the first 200. So it was not good. Let's see. And the reason that I actually did not end up loving these books is partially because, so first off, the characters are really underdeveloped. Now, in the first book, it didn't bother me so much because as long as your characters aren't like super cardboard cutout, I can forgive a lot. However, if you're going to leave your characters underdeveloped in the first book, in that second book, you better be spending some time with them. And we didn't. They were just as underdeveloped at the end as they were at the beginning, and it really made me very unhappy. The second major problem I had with these books is the romance. There is a romance between Avery and one of her kidnappers, and I was not okay with it because it was like the main guy, and he tortured her and he was violent with her. Like, he backhanded her in one of the scenes, and this physical violence towards Avery is never addressed. And I really did not like that. We watched them like learn to respect each other as like professionals, and we see that they have lust for each other, but we never see them become friends really. We never see them address the fact that like he was violent with her, like nothing. They are just at the end of the first book, they're like, I love you. And then I thought maybe we would get more in the second book because that love interest is our dual perspective. It's a second perspective. And he just doesn't have a conscience. He basically just relies on what Avery's going to feel. So he's basically like, well, this will make Avery happy, so I'll do it. And this will make Avery mad, so I'm not going to. So I did not like that at all. And then the last thing that really, really bothered me is that our main villain has the ability to incite amazing amounts of lust in Avery. Like, it's magical. And he does it. And she basically turns into a puddle of goo that cannot make any good choices. And this really, really bothered me. Partially because, like, she knows the stakes that are involved, right? It's not just her own safety, her own life on the line. It's the safety and the lives of the people that she cares about, the people she's closest to, and she still has literally no willpower. And I'm just like, I don't like that. I don't find it believable. I just don't like it. I don't like it. So I ended up DNFing this trilogy. I'm not going to read the third book. And honestly, because there's always some weird sexual stuff going on with main characters in the stuff that I have read from Maria V. Snyder, I'm not going to read any more from her because I just do not appreciate that. So then, after that, I read How to Seize a Dragon's Jewel by Cressida Cowell, the 10th book in the How to Train Your Dragon series. This is an elementary school fantasy series, although at this point it is more middle grade with the topics we're dealing with. But it follows our main character of Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, and he is like, this series is his journey to becoming the greatest Viking of all time. And in this particular book, Hiccup is an outcast, but there's this war with the dragons. He's trying to help, and now he has to go on a journey to procure this thing that will help. It's a very familiar story. And honestly, I just thought this was really slow. We're moving the overarching plot forward, but barely. And so it felt so long and so slow, and I just did not love it. It also felt very series of unfortunate events where, like, Hiccup would run into a situation and he'd kind of get out of it, and then something else would go wrong and he'd fix it more or less, and then something else. And it was just like, I just don't like those kinds of stories. But I will say that the one good thing about this book that I did enjoy is that we did get to spend some time with Valhalla Rama, which is Hiccup's mother. And up until this point in the series, we just really haven't spent any time with her. So it was really nice to see her. But otherwise, I did not love this book. I do read this series at the request of my older child. So that's why I'm continuing on a series that I don't love. Just in case you're curious. But after that, I read Bump and Run by Edward Taft. Now, I have a reading blog of reactions to this particular book. If you're interested, I will leave it linked down below. But this is described by the author as an erotic golf thriller where we are following our main characters, Bonnie and Craig. And they are a couple that are police officers up in Seattle, and they decide to take a weekend away and go to Arizona and stay at a golf course so that they can play some golf and reconnect. And they overhear a plot to kill a senator, and so of course they immediately jump into action to protect him. This was terrible. It was an absolute, I guess it's not a dumpster fire. It's like one level above a dumpster fire, because the dumpster fires still can be fun to read, and this just wasn't. Basically, there was definitely golf in here, and it was like out of place because Edward Taft, aka Dean Wesley Smith, used to be a pro golfer, and that shows, and it just felt so out of place in the story. It wasn't a thriller because I never once was on the edge of my seat, and it technically was erotica, but it was terrible. So like, it just, like with erotica, it's really about the sex scenes, right? And they were so blandly written that I just didn't understand. And even at the end of the book, like we got like two fade to black scenes. And I'm just like, if it's erotica, why would you do that? Now, that being said, I did actually enjoy the last 50 pages because there was a bunch of like crime stuff. And I think Dean Wesley Smith might be more of a crime writer because it was actually really interesting. However, I do not recommend this book. Please don't pick this up. It's kind of hard to find. Please don't. It's so bad. I probably shouldn't keep it either, but I'm probably going to. After that, I read The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho, and this is an adult fantasy novella, and it's following our main character of Gwet Im, and she joins up with a group of bandits to help protect a sacred object. And I do have a full length review of this if you are interested in my full thoughts. And the thing is, like, I think this was well done. Generally speaking, I think that the world building was enough to give us a sense of the place. Although when we did, there was some talk of like information about the war. I didn't quite follow along, so that's not great. But other than that, I do think it was pretty well done. There is before I forget, there is a weird grammar thing in this particular book that sounds unusual to native English speakers, but it was clear that this was intentional. So just a heads up, it is intentional. You just have to get used to it, and you can do it. I did it, and it's fine. But just a heads up. But the thing that makes this really shine is our main character of Gwet-Im. She is intriguing and interesting, and honestly, if there was a full-length book written about her, I would 100% read it. And so I do think, overall, I like this story. I do think I missed some of the details, which is pretty normal for me on novellas, like where every single detail is important. I'm not guaranteed to catch 100% of them. So I do have plans to reread this sometime in the future, and I think I will like it even better the second time around. And then lastly, there is a content warning for this book for dead naming and misgendering. Now, when it's done, it's very much gray area. Some people are going to have problems with it, and some people are going to be okay. So obviously, I want to warn for it for the people who may not be okay. And then after that, I did read The Tolling of Pavlov's Bells by Seanan McGuire. This is a short story that I found because somebody on Twitter pointed it out and said, hey, Seanan McGuire apparently is able to predict how society is going to react during a pandemic. And so I'm like, interesting. So I went and read it. And yeah, I would say that that is true. This story is actually interesting, and the structure of it is probably the most interesting part about it, in that, like, when we start our short story, it's present day, and then we move back in time to a particular point, and then we move forward in time back to present day. And when we're going backwards, we're following like one set of information, and then when we move forward, we're following a different set of information. And it's just a really interesting way to tell a story, and I think that Seanan McGuire did a very good job at it. However, the overall story itself, I thought, was fine. I didn't think it was amazing, but I did think it was interesting. So it is from, I think, Apex magazine. It is, you can read it for free. I'll leave it linked down below if you are interested. After that, I read Magic Binds, and later in the month I read Magic Triumphs by Ilona Andrews. These are books 9 and 10 in the Kate Daniels series. So the Kate Daniels series is an adult urban fantasy series that follows our main character of Kate Daniels, and she lives in an alternate version of Atlanta, Georgia, where magic comes in waves, and when it does, technology dies. And then the magic leaves and technology works again. And in book 9, a person in Atlanta has been kidnapped, and Kate kind of has to go rescue them. And then in book 10, it's like there's a war that has been declared, and Kate needs to figure out how to avert that war. This is such a good series. This is so good. It's just, the world building is so interesting and well done, to the point where, like, where there's certain things that are introduced where if it were any other book, I would sit there and kind of eye roll and like throw a little shade on the author. But in this, I'm just like, oh, of course that makes sense. And I totally roll with it. And that really can only happen when you have very, very solid world building. And so I just think it's so, so interesting. The plots, generally speaking, are just solid, interesting plots that really drive the book. And you just want to keep reading until you get to the end. I think that the characters in this series are also very, very strong. I don't love all the characters. but I really like watching their interactions, which is pretty unusual for me. Like, I don't always, like, when I don't like a lot of the characters, sometimes will struggle with the books. And this, I still like watching them, and I love that. So overall, I think that these books, this series in general, were good. No exception. This is book 10 is the grand finale. It is the last book in the series, and it was kind of everything you would want from a grand finale, with this big high stakes battle and like every character from the series showing up in some capacity so you could see what happened to them. And it ended in a nice way. I do think it was a little bit clean for my tastes, the ending, but I think that it was still within the realm of believability, and so I accept. Overall, I just think that this is excellent. Now, I did mention this in my reading vlog that the first books are racist, and they are. It's like ignorant white people racism, so it's at least not malicious, but that's about the only good thing you can say about it. It's still hurtful, it's still there. It's not super prevalent, but in some ways that's worse, because then when it comes up, it is jarring. It's one of those things where it's like some people are going to have issue and some people are going to be okay. I will say that for the most part, after the first couple of books, it gets better. Now, there is one thing that it was brought to my attention. I actually just learned about it this evening, where it's an indigenous belief that was not treated with respect. But like, again, that's like the only thing that I know of from the later books. So if you can stick with it, which is a big if, and I know that, I do think that this otherwise is an excellent, excellent series. And I would recommend it if you can get past the first couple of books. So after that, I read Stitching Snow by R.C. Lewis. I do have a full-length review for this one as well. And this is a young adult science fiction retelling of Snow White, where we're following our main character of Essie. And she is living on this backwater planet called Thanda, where she is in charge of the maintenance and coding of these 7 drones who work in the local mine. And there is a shuttle that crash lands near her settlement, so she decides to help the pilot repair this shuttle. And the story goes from there. Overall, I really like this, but my biggest issue with this is that it really just needed another 50 to 100 pages. So it's like the world building was generally okay, except we needed a little bit more information about the political situation for like the back half to be better. A lot of the characters were kind of underdeveloped. We just needed a little bit more time with them. The first half of the plot was actually really interesting, really intriguing, and the second half lost some of those twists and turns and just kind of became predictable. But again, we had so much to cover that I feel like if we had just had the author had more space, it would have been fine, and we could have added some more of those twists and turns in. So like, I have kind of mixed feelings, because the first half was actually extremely strong. The second half was not nearly as strong. It was still good. I still liked it, but it was this close, you guys, this close to just being an amazing book. I ended up giving this 4.25 stars, but honestly, like, that's because the first half was so strong, and the second half didn't completely fall apart. It just wasn't nearly as good. But there are content warnings in this book for allusions to past rape, as well as an aborted rape scene in there. After that, I read The Tea Master and the Detective by Aliette de Bodard. Now, this is an adult science fiction novella, and you guys, it's Sherlock Holmes. It's Sherlock Holmes in the far future, in space, with Vietnamese culture, and Watson is a living spaceship. Like, that's really what this is. The plot doesn't matter, because that's what this is. But I found that the writing style was actually pretty easy to understand, even though it wasn't as straightforward as I normally would like. I did get the big picture, but again, it's a novella, so I do think I missed some of the details, and I didn't love it quite as much as I think I could love it. My biggest gripe is actually with that living spaceship. They are very much defined by their PTSD. That's really all we get about them, and it's kind of annoying that we don't get more. Now, to be fair, this novella is less than 100 pages. We don't have time to do it, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but you could add a couple pages and flesh this character out a little bit more. But I still liked it, and I found it intriguing. I found it I mean, I liked it, and I do want to. This is another one that I do want to reread, and I think that I will like it better upon a reread. But as of right now, I did give it a 3.5-star rating. And then the last thing that I read this month is actually a short story I found on Tumblr, because yes, I am on that hell site. But occasionally I do like to go to one blog, which is writing prompts. And essentially all they do is provide writing prompts. And then other users will write short stories using that prompt. And a lot of them are pretty run of the mill, but the one that I found was so good. And the prompt was essentially, you are a child care worker in the toddler room when you find out that the end of the world is nigh. And so the story that I read is by Bethany the Martian, and it was so good. It was structurally very interesting. It was done as like a series of recordings by our main character, and it was good. And I was very impressed at how it's short. It's like 10 to 15 minutes, but the emotion that it evokes is just so real. I like very much cried at this story. And so like I said, it's only 10 to 15 minutes. It's short. You should go read it. I will leave it linked down below. But that is it, you guys. Those are all the things that I read in the month of October. Like I said, it was a little bit of a weird reading month, and there was nothing that I truly loved apart from the Kate Daniels series, which is unusual. I generally tend to like what I'm reading. So I don't know. We'll see how next month goes. But at this point, that is all I have. So until next time, guys, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.